Hello, everyone from the Authors Guild Foundation, and welcome to Agent Talks. This is our series in collaboration with Literary Agents of Change. And this series, A Visiting Agent speaks to their expertise. Today we have Vicky Weber on what makes a picture book work. Vicky is a best-selling children's author as well as a literary agent at Creative Media Agency. As a former elementary school teacher, she has a deep understanding of how kids connect with stories, and she has plenty of wisdom to share on this topic. So I'm really excited for today's talk. We got your pre-submitted questions in advance, so we have those incorporated. We'll have time for Q&A at the end. You can type new questions into the Q&A box as we go. I'll say that the Authors Guild Foundation is happy to make educational programs like this free to the public, thanks to support from our donors. If you're unfamiliar with the Authors Guild, I invite you to visit us at authorsguild.org to learn about what we do for members, namely contract reviews and other legal services, but there's also website hosting, regional chapters, and a lot more. Through the foundation, we provide programs like this to anyone who needs it, and we advocate for authors' best interest on issues like free speech, AI, and fair pay throughout the industry. And we're also very grateful to the organizations we partner with to bring you great content like this. This series, it's Literary Agents of Change. And for a brief word on that, I'll turn things over now to our moderator today, Tamara Kowar, literary agent at De Fiore and Company. And Tamara, thank you.
Thanks so much, Johnny. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. I hope you're all enjoying your summer. I'm Tamara Kowar. I'm a literary agent at De Fiore and Company. I'll be your co-moderator today, and I also serve on the board of Literary Agents of Change. We're so happy to be continuing this um, Agent Talks series with the Authors Guild Foundation. A little bit about us. Literary Agents of Change is a nonprofit that was formed to help dismantle barriers to entry into a career as a literary agent for members of historically underrepresented groups. We run a fellowship program and a mentorship program. I co-direct Literary Agents of Change's mentorship program, which was founded to serve people from historically underrepresented groups in the agenting community and seeks to increase retention and promotion in the industry. So we're so very thrilled to see such a wonderful turnout for a member of our current mentorship cohort, Vicky Weber, who is leading this webinar on picture books. As Johnny mentioned, if you have any questions during the presentation, please just drop them in the Q&A section, and we'll also leave time for questions at the end, including your pre-submitted questions. So thank you all for being here, and without further ado, I'll let Vicky take it from here.
Well, thank you so much for having me, first of all. I'm thrilled at how many people are watching live, and I already see some awesome questions starting to come in. If it is something that I can answer in the moment, I'll do that. Otherwise, I will save it for the end. So don't be afraid to put those in as we go. As both of you have said, my name is, oh, nope, I need to share my screen first. You can't see what I see. Let's see. There we go. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
There we go. All right, starting over. I'm Vicky Weber. I wear a lot of hats, to say the least. I started out in the industry as a picture book author. I actually started out on the self-publishing side, and then transitioned into IP and licensing, and then eventually became a literary agent. Before entering the publishing industry, I was an elementary school teacher. My degree is in music education, and my master's is in teaching and learning with an ESL concentration. So that tends to be where the subject matter of my own personal writing comes from. I am represented as a writer by Amy Jafrida over at Belcastro, and as myself as a literary agent over at Creative Media Agency, I represent everything from kidlit all the way through adult. I'm also a mom of two. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at home. So never a dull moment for me. But I love doing presentations like this because I like to say you can take the teacher out of the classroom, but you can't take the teacher out of me. So I'm all about demystifying the industry in any way that I can, because I have been on your side of the industry before. The most recent time I queried was back in March. So this most recent March. So I've been there. I know what it's like. I know it's hard. And the best thing that you can do is keep educating yourself, keep growing, Keep putting your best foot forward. Now, the other thing that I really want to highlight before we dive into anything else is please, please, please keep in mind that there is more than one path to success in this industry, especially in this industry now. And because of that, there are common frameworks and best practices and things like that. But sometimes things happen unconventionally. And so, one of the things I really like to talk about is self publishing and traditional publishing and how they intersect. Because no matter who you are, there is not one route that is better than the other. It's about what's best for you and what's best for your manuscript. And sometimes that changes. Self-publishing, if you had asked me, 4 or 5 years ago, I would say that that was the best route for me. But at this stage in my life, it's certainly not. And I know as my kids get older, that could shift back. So keep an open mind and always keep at the forefront what your vision is, what your goal is, and what you want to accomplish. Because what you don't want to do is end up writing somebody else's story. Let's write yours. So the first thing we need to cover is the what. Too often, I see individuals mistake or mix up picture books with being just a book with pictures. That is not the case. It is a genre in itself. So board books are those really thick paged cardboard. Sometimes they'll have a lift the flaps or sensory things in there, but board books are typically for ages 0 to 3 or 0 to 4, give or take. Picture books are typically age 3 to 7, sometimes 4 to 8, again, give or take. Then the next step up is an early reader. Early readers or leveled readers are meant to be read independently by a child. Those are the books that are like The Cat Sat, The Cat Sat on the Mat. Picture books are not meant to be read independently by a child. Picture books are meant to be a read aloud experience between an adult and a child, whether that's a teacher and a classroom, a parent and a child, a grandparent and a child, etc. So with picture books, the focus is not on whether the language is decodable or if the child can read it on their own. That's not the point of a picture book. The point of a picture book is it something a child can verbally understand when it is read aloud to them? So early readers are the ones they can read independently. Then we move into chapter books, then followed by middle grade and young adult. Now, the thing is, chapter books sometimes have illustrations. Even younger middle grade sometimes has illustrations. Early readers are illustrated, board books are illustrated. So just because it's illustrated does not make it a picture book. A picture book is a very specific genre. In fact, every picture book that you pick up should have two things. Number one, some type of relationship between the text and the art. There's 100 million ways that could look. It could be creative page turns. It could be stuff hidden in the art that is not in the text. There's a lot of different ways that could look. But a picture book, that story relies on more than just the text. There is some type of relationship there. And the second thing is figurative language. Figurative language is stuff like personification, alliteration, onomatopoeias, hyperboles, intentional repetition, lyricism, idiom, symbolism, puns, rhyme, simile, metaphor. I could go on and on and on. There's tons and tons and tons. When you read a picture book, if it's falling a little bit flat, but you can't pinpoint why, because the story arc is solid and the idea is fun, it's probably missing one of these things. Now, you do not and should not use all of them, but the feel of the book will change depending on what you use. A book that uses alliteration and lyricism is going to have a significantly different feel than alliteration and puns. Those are two very different books, even if the concept is the same. The execution is worlds apart. So play with figurative language and see what comes naturally to you and what feels like your voice. When you know to look for this, you'll also be able to start picking it out in the books that you're currently reading. And you'll see what combinations different authors have. For myself, I tend to lean towards alliteration and rhyme, um, or lyricism. It depends on the book a little bit. Now we're gonna circle back to that in a moment, but before we do, has anybody heard these words before? I can't see you, so I'm hoping some hands are raised. Okay, literary, upmarket, and commercial can be pretty tricky to understand, especially if you're newer to the industry or if you only know how it applies to novels. And I see some questions and comments about quiet picture books and things like that. So pay attention. This is going to help. If you were to go turn on the radio right now, right this moment, you are going to hear a lot of different songs by a lot of different artists. And if you could travel back in time 5 years, 10 years, you'll hear even different artists, even more different songs, but they will all have two things in common. One, they are meant to appeal to as wide a pool of people as possible. And two, they're primarily meant to be entertaining. So if you go listen to the radio, every song is going to have wide appeal and mostly just be entertaining. That's commercial fiction. So books that are just silly, fun to read, there's no like lesson, or if there is, it's super, super, super subtle. The stuff that just gets kids to fall in love with reading, it's just fun for the sake of being fun, no more, no less. That's commercial fiction. That's a commercial picture book. Now, literary, on the other hand, literary picture books or literary fiction in general is more similar to a symphonic orchestra or an opera or a jazz band. It's not going to appeal as widely as the songs you'll hear on the radio, but the people it will appeal to, it will move them at their core. It will open up discussions. It will change perspectives. If you think of anything you read in high school where you had discussions on what is morally right and what would you do in this situation and who is the antagonist, who's the, who's in the wrong here, what does this say about society? All literary fiction, which is why literary fiction often is award winning. Usually if you see a book has won an award, most of the time it's going to be literary. So that's literary fiction. The issue is that there's literary, upmarket, and commercial concepts. And then there's literary, upmarket, and commercial prose. You can have a super, super commercial concept and literary writing, or the other way around. Those are kind of tricky, but you can have it. And because not everybody realizes that that there's that distinction, sometimes it's easy to have the lines crossed with what you want a book to be. Now, upmarket is where those things cross in the center. That is more relevant for novels because there's more time and space. In picture books, upmarket's not really a thing because the word count is so limited. It tends to lean very commercial or very literary. There's not a whole lot that's kind of in the center there for the most part. So when it comes to your vision here, If you want to write commercial picture books, if we go back to our figurative language, the choices that you might make to write something that is super commercial um, is probably not the same choices you would make if you're trying to write something super literary. And because of that, the first thing that you need to figure out is, what do I want this book to be? Because if you know what you want the book to be, then you can also evaluate the feedback that you receive. You would not believe how, actually, this happened the other day. I had somebody pitch me live on a call on a conference. And I asked them some questions, and then they said, okay, I pitched another agent, and they said to do XYZ. I don't know that I want to do that. What is your opinion? And I said, okay. I explained literary, upmarket, and commercial. I said, where do you see this fitting? And they said, oh, this is literary. This is very literary. And I said, great. What did that agent what would their feedback make your book? And they said, oh, that agent's feedback was feedback on how to make my book more commercial. And I said, great. Do you want your book to be more commercial? A commercial agent gave you advice on how to make your book more commercial. But if that's not your goal, if you want it to be literary, that is a piece of advice you can set aside, or you can look at more objectively and say, okay, is there some truth here that I could apply in a way that, that best serves the book? So that's why you need to know what you're going for, because there's going to be so much feedback out there. There's going to be so many opinions from readers, from agents, from editors, from publishers, from the public. You have to know what you're going for and learn how to make it the best that it can be. And that doesn't happen overnight. That takes time. So give yourself some grace, but also start to recognize, what do I want this to be? I had a couple of examples. I'm not sure if it'll share the sound for a couple of these. But this one was called A Mischief of Mice. And this one, oops, there we go. There we go. A mischief of mice used to play in these woods. We start right off with some wordplay, some alliteration, and we also have a double meaning here, because a mischief of mice is what a group of mice is called, like a gaggle of geese, or something like that. So we have multiple layers in this one page. Let me see if I can get the sound going for this one. I might need to reshare. Hang on. Share sound. Okay, that should work. All right, so this one is Eyes That Kiss in the Corners.
Some people have eyes like sapphire lagoons, with lashes like lace trim on ball gowns sweeping their cheeks as they twirl. Big eyes, long lashes. Not me. I have eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea. My eyes are just like Mama's. Mama's eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea crinkle into crescent moons when she comes home from work.
So we're not going to listen to the whole thing, but you'll notice that there's lots of alliteration, there's lots of lyricism, there's lots of metaphor. Very, very heavy in this. Eyes That Kiss in the Corners is a super literary picture book. But you can see how her voice pops. That's the combination that she picked.
Some people have eyes like...
Let's look at a completely different one.
Dragons are fierce. Dragons are frightening. We take on the world with a mighty roar. Chew. Sit down. Relax. Sip some orange ginger tea. It's time to stop. Take a breath. Oh, but dragons can soar. Dragons can dive. We summon trembling thunder with a single roar.
So again, now this one is very different because we have intentional repetition throughout. We have dragons are this, dragons are that. We take on the world with a mighty roar, and we know that he's going to sneeze, which is an onomatopoeia. And so throughout the book, that keeps happening. But dragons can blah, and dragons can blah. We do this amazing thing with a roar, choo. So we have intentional repetition, we have onomatopoeia, we have that predictability that kids love.
Dragons are.
Oh, that's where it went. Mischief of Mice. Okay. And this one's called Rock Stars Don't Nap. And the first page got cut off, so here's the top. In a small hospital in a small town, a big star was born. While other babies whimpered and whined, Jimmy's righteous wail shook the nursery all night long. By morning, the reviews were in. This baby was born to rock. We have a ton of wordplay here, intentional repetition, and you can see how all of these books have a different voice and a different feel because they're supposed to. Voice is kind of like personality. Some other great examples that I highly recommend you look up after this. The Quiet Forest has alliteration, onomatopoeia, intentional repetition. Woven of the World has lyricism and rhyme. Watercress has lyricism and metaphor. The Book That Almost Rhymed has rhyme and wordplay, and I Will Read to You has intentional repetition and rhyme. So again, these are just some examples, and I want you to really think about what are you drawn to. Now, I see questions about rhyme. I see those popping up. I will get to that in just a few minutes. Let me see if there's any that I missed here. Okay. Okay. Someone asked a question about literary, upmarket, and commercial art. And that's a very excellent question. We'll dive a little bit more deeply into those things later. But if you think about books like Eyes That Kiss in the Corners and Watercress and things that are very literary books, look at the art style. You'll notice that they are more like manual mediums. They tend to be more, watercolors. They tend to be a little bit more messy or sometimes abstract, right? But something that's super commercial might look more clean and punchy. That's also a great way to tell what publishers or what agents specialize in what area of the market. If you are querying agents or you're sending out submissions to publishers, and they say, I'd really love to find the next Watercress, but you have something super commercial, that might not be the best fit. And very often I see writers not have alignment there. And either that's what causes that disconnect, or sometimes that's what causes them to listen to feedback that in the end is not helpful for their vision. All right, now let's look at a classic story arc. So in a typical novel, this is what a story arc would look like. We have the opening, the inciting incident, the rising action, the falling action, and then the resolution. But in a picture book, look at this sizing here. The bulk of the story is going to be the rising action. The falling action is practically a cliff note. It's like not even its own sliver. So in a typical picture book story arc, we're going to get oriented in the world probably within the first page or two. The majority of the book is going to be that rising tension in some way. Then we have the turning point and the resolution. Now, in something that has action, often there's a rule of three. Like they try three different things and it fails each time, or each thing they try gets them closer but with unexpected consequences. That's typical for today's market. But it does not always have to be action based or physical. If you go read Eyes That Kiss in the Corners, I love that book if you couldn't tell. Um, the shape of that book is an emotional journey. She starts out with, and I'm going to paraphrase this horribly, she starts out with, other people have eyes like this, not me. I have eyes that kiss in the corners. But her attitude is very different. That's our inciting incident. And then she says, my mom has eyes that kiss in the corners, and she says wonderful things about her mom. And then she says her grandma has eyes that kiss in the corners. She says wonderful things about her grandma. And my grandma has eyes like my sister, and here's all these wonderful things about my sister. And my sister has eyes like me. I have eyes that kiss in the corners. And she finally says all these wonderful things about herself. And so we witness the emotional transformation of that character, even though there isn't physical action-based things happening. So start taking note of that as you read for comp titles. Okay. Now, we've seen a lot with rhyme. I'm sure you've heard a lot about, does rhyme sell? That is something I hear all the time. Rhyme doesn't sell. Rhyme doesn't sell. Okay, yes, it does. Yes, it does. The tricky thing is the understanding behind why it does or why it doesn't. So rhyme, I can't remember the name of the study, but years ago, there was a study done and it proved a point that impacted the industry. If you have ever been in your car and listening to the radio or listening to your favorite song and all of a sudden you go, wait, that's what they're singing? Happen to anybody? Happens to me all the time. That's because our brains process musicality before language. So because of that, if you read a rhyming book to a child and then you ask them questions about that book, like who was the main character? Who is the main character? How did they feel when? What was your favorite part? They can't really tell you because they did not process the language. They processed the experience and the musicality and the pattern. So when it comes to rhyme, that meant that anything that had educational value or ties to the school and library market was not as effective if it rhymed. So how that translated into the publishing industry is that most picture books, especially if there was some type of takeaway or they wanted there to be crossover to foreign rights markets or school and library markets, it's in prose, right? However, rhyme is incredibly beneficial for developing babies' brains. And that's why board books almost always rhyme, because that is important for their development. Now, you can rhyme and it can still sell well, so long as it is just something super fun and commercial that doesn't teach something that the kids have to retain. So if you just have like a super fun romp, there's no lesson, there's no moral, there's no, ties to school and library market, you can still rhyme. But if you want it to teach a lesson, rhyme is likely not the best option. So some pros, it adds rhythm and beat, it adds predictability, it's fun. But the cons of rhyme is that it limits vocabulary and the word counts are shorter. In today's picture book market, word counts have shrunk because attention spans have shrunk. So most picture books today end up around 500 to 600 words, give or take. If you look back at the picture books that were being published when I was a child, those word counts were like 1,000 plus, sometimes 1,500. Kids can't sit and read them on a massive scale like that anymore. The average kid, I should say. So the word count is short for prose. For rhyming, you're aiming for more like 300 to 500 words. So if you have a rhyming manuscript, it will end up being shorter than prose. Now, it doesn't sell well in today's industry, I just touched on. But the other piece is that if you're going to rhyme, it has to be absolutely perfect. No excuses. Now, I'm going to gloss over my little rhyming crash course because I want to make sure we have time for questions, because we've got some really good ones in here. When I say perfect, I mean it has to have all three of these things. The rhyme has to be perfect, the meter has to be perfect, and every line needs to build the plot. Typically, what I see is most writers can get 2 of those 3 pretty well. The meter is awesome, the plot keeps moving forward, but 60% of it doesn't rhyme. You would not believe how many people say, here's a rhyming manuscript, and then the majority of it does not rhyme. I don't know why it happens, but it happens all the time. I don't get it. Or we have every line rhymes and the meter is great, but the plot goes in circles. We don't really go anywhere or accomplish anything. So you have to have all 3 things super solid. So here's my little trick for writing in rhyme. Look at the emphasis pattern that you set. If I were to just read this sentence, he went to the window and opened the box. Try to figure out where the natural emphasis falls. I would never read it, he went to the window and opened the box. I'm not going to read it like that. That sounds silly. So I bolded here where that emphasis falls. He went to the window and opened the box. And you'll notice it's a little bit like a waltz. Da 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 da. Da 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1. So for my little example here, I need to make sure that it rhymes, that that emphasis pattern stays the same, that's my meter, and that it moves the plot forward. He went to the window and opened the box. Surprised that inside was a cute little fox. That's just one option, but of course, there are many. So now let's talk traditional versus self-publishing. So no matter which route you're going down, you're going to want to write your draft and then revise yourself. Then you want to get other trustworthy eyes on it. Beta readers, critique partners, as many as possible. And rinse and repeat. A lot of newer writers, myself included when I first started, just don't get enough eyes and enough feedback on their manuscript. And trust me, feedback is your friend. It can hurt sometimes, but if you have a strong vision for what you're going for, you'd be amazed how beautifully it can come together when you have some other perspectives giving you giving that book the best opportunity possible. If you want to go the traditional publishing route, after you have revised like crazy, the next thing you're going to want to do is query agents. If an agent extends an offer of representation, then the next thing that happens is more revisions between you and that agent. And then the agent will send it on submission to publishers. Eventually, hopefully, you'll get an offer from a publisher in and a contract, and that's when your agent will negotiate on your behalf. And at that point is when the production actually begins. You'll work with the editor at a publishing house, illustration will happen, marketing, printing, publication, all of those things. So you'll notice what that means is if you want to go the traditional publishing route, do not hire an illustrator. The only time you should be working with an illustrator for traditional publishing on your end alone is if you are also the illustrator. Now, there are rare cases where an agent might represent like an author-illustrator team where they're 2 individual people. And there are plenty of times where a publisher will give you a say on who your illustrator is. Just for example, my author, picture book author, had a contract and they said, okay, here's some options for illustrators. What do you think? And my author said, I was really hoping for somebody with more of a style like this. And they said, okay, cool, back to the drawing board. And they went and they found somebody that my author loved. That is not always the case, but typically, you will know whether or not you have a say in some of those things at the offer stage. And that is something you can ask your agent for, is consultation on picking the illustrator. Now, if you want to self-publish, this is where that deviates. You're then going to go for professional editing, multiple rounds, meaning developmental editing, multiple rounds of it, then copy editing, multiple rounds of it, and then proofreading. Then you hire a freelance illustrator, and you will want to make sure that you have all of the appropriate rights to sell your book. If you do not have in a contract the commercial usage rights to those illustrations, you cannot legally sell your book. You can get sued. That is also the reason you do not want to be using AI illustrations. Per the law right now, you cannot copyright anything that is AI generated. That includes illustration and art. So if it can't be copyrighted, that means that you don't have the commercial usage license to sell it. And if you don't have the commercial usage rights, then you cannot legally sell your book. You can get sued. And if you don't have an LLC, then they could go after your personal assets, like your house, your car, things like that. Things you don't want to get involved in. So don't use AI art. At least at this stage, it's not going to be good for you in the long run. But also, if that sounds like a nightmare to you, that might be one reason the traditional publishing route is better for you, because they will handle the illustrations in-house. For self-publishing, then you will start marketing. You'll market before publication, during, and after. Market. And then there's printing and publication. There are lots of different ways that you can print and publish as a self-published author. Now, I'm not going to go through these in detail because I want to get to these questions. But all this breaks down to is that both routes have pros and cons. And what might be a pro for you could be a con for somebody else. So I've met authors who are like, woohoo, self-publishing, I get to be involved in every part of the process. And then I've talked to authors that say, oh my gosh, I have to be involved in every part of the process. Right? So keep that in mind when you are making decisions like that. Really think about what matters to you and what doesn't. And lean into that. Now, I want to jump to questions, but if you wanted to get in touch with me, you're welcome to screenshot this page, or I bet we can send something through in the chat. But this is a special link to query me. I'm closed right this second. I usually am open, but this will let you send a query through anyway, regardless of your genre. You can also follow me on social media. I have a blog and a YouTube channel. And then I also have a picture book coaching program that you can try free for 7 days with that link. So now I would love to jump into questions.
Vicky, thank you so much for this hugely informative and really fun webinar. I learned a lot, and I see we have a lot of great questions in the Q&A. I know you've been sort of perusing them. We also have pre-submitted questions, so maybe we'll start with those,
Sure.
and then we can go to the ones in the Q&A that you feel you can answer. So starting off with the pre-submitted questions, we have a great one about sort of querying basics. What is standard these days for a non-illustrator to submit as a dummy? When, if ever, is it appropriate for an author to team up with an illustrator instead of the publisher assigning one? And is it true that publishers are wanting author illustrators more these days? And then if that weren't enough questions, I did see in the chat that somebody asked, is it true that agents are also wanting illustrators more these days rather than just picture book authors? So
Okay.
start wherever you want to start.
Whew. All right. Um, if you're a non-illustrator, if you are just a picture book writer, you don't need a dummy. You just need a manuscript. Um, you will want to have art notes as needed, as few as possible. Art notes are meant to just be the stuff that the text does not communicate. On my YouTube channel, Chelsea Tornetto has a really fabulous in-depth video on art notes, and she actually takes one of her traditionally published books, takes the manuscript prior, and takes the finished product, and like shows you how it all comes together. It's really detailed. I highly recommend you spend some time with that. But you do not need a dummy. You should not have a dummy if you're just a writer. So when is it appropriate for an author to team up with an illustrator instead of the publisher assigning one? Typically, publishers want to be in charge of the art. And the reason for that is because they have branding and they have stylistic expectations, that their readers expect. So you can have input on that. But if they love your story, but they don't love the artist, that you've selected, that might be the reason that you're no longer a fit for that publisher. That could be a good thing or a bad thing. Most of the time, if it's a team, the best thing that works is like a husband-wife team or a mother-son, father-daughter team or something like that. It's rare to see a team up of people who are unrelated in some type of personal way at that stage, but also there's exceptions to everything. So it's certainly not impossible, but it would certainly be easier for you to query and secure representation on your own as a writer. And if you get a contract from a traditional publisher, request that you get input on who the illustrator is. Because many of my authors have gotten to choose who their illustrator is, and the publisher was totally fine with that. Is it true that publishers are wanting more author illustrators these days? Actually, I've been experiencing the opposite at times. The hard part about the industry is that it's not static. And the things that an agent sees, like on my end, are not the things that you'll see on the reader end. I know this isn't picture book related, but I have so many people say the only thing selling right now is romantasy. And I'm like, well, no, actually on my end, editors are telling me they have too much because what the reader sees being published right now, those books were bought 2 or 3 years prior. So the trends that you see on the bookshelf don't always reflect what's being purchased by publishers right now. And because of that, I always say don't write to trend. Because by the time you write to whatever the trend is and make it really, really good, that trend is probably over. Write what you want to write and just make it the best version of your vision for it as it can be. Now, back to the author illustrator piece. The reason why agents sometimes like author illustrators or prefer author illustrators is because it's double the commission. So if I have just a writer and I get a contract from a traditional publisher, that writer gets an advance and gets royalties. But in picture books, so does the illustrator. They also get an advance. They also get royalties. So if that person is the same person, now the royalty rate is higher and the advance is higher because they're absorbing both cuts. The tricky thing is that that's not an automatic reason for it being a match. In my experience, it's actually trickier to place author illustrators because the text has to be a good fit for the publisher, and so does the art. And sometimes you run into a case where the text is a great fit, but the art isn't, or the other way around. Being an agent is a little bit like being a matchmaker. And so there are pros to that, but there's also setbacks as well. But one of the positives to an author illustrator is I also have the option of pitching them as an illustrator only to illustrate other people's titles, and make money for the creator that way. Now, speaking to me personally, the reason why I'm actively looking for more author illustrators is because I only have two. Everybody else on my picture book list is a writer only. And so that is a gap in my list that I am eager to fill. That doesn't mean that I'm never, ever, ever looking for picture book writers only, but I don't have a gap there the way I have a gap for author illustrators. Did I get all of those?
I think you did. I think you did. And then there was a question in the chat since you mentioned art notes for, picture book authors. Somebody had asked sort of how much art notes should we put in a picture book manuscript? How much is too much? Do we use them sparingly? When does it make sense to add art notes in a
As
manuscript?
few as possible. You want to think about the stuff that breaks the story. Like if your art note says, this is a kid wearing a red shirt. Okay, does the story break if the shirt is green? No, then you don't need that art note. It needs to be the stuff that is happening that the text is not depicting, that the illustrator needs to know because it changes the interpretation of the story. So as few as possible, um, and they should only be things that are absolutely necessary.
Thank you. Um, I think there was a question that was pre-submitted. I know Um, you touched on this already a little bit, but if you could address this, a few people asked about AI illustrations, especially for self-publishing, and whether it's frowned upon to use AI images for a dummy. I think you mostly addressed this, but
Yeah, the short answer is right now, per the law, because the law can change. But at this instance, you would just not have the copyright. And like I said, you do not want to be in a position where you get sued. Um, because that, could have devastating effects, even if you have an LLC. So you don't want to do that. But also, readers typically can tell when something is AI generated. AI is getting smarter and smarter, but it's fairly easy still to tell if something is AI generated because of how the characters move or don't move from page to page, um, and all of that nuance there. Um, but yes, it is frowned upon in a dummy because one of the things you don't want to do. So I never represent creatives where the author and the illustrator are separate people. I only represent authors or author illustrators. And so if you send me art, my assumption is going to be that it is yours and you have the rights to it. It's not a great feeling if I'm like, oh, okay, I've got an author illustrator in here. Wait, is this AI? I'm not really sure. Let me spend some time digging into it. And then I do dig into it and I go, yeah, this is AI. Okay, so if they're trying to pull the wool over my eyes on this, what else are they trying to pull the wool over on, did they write their own book? Are they even a real person? Is this a bot? I get bot queries. I get bot queries all the time. So then I start to wonder, are you even a real person? Is any of this legit? Are you going to put the work in that's needed? Because this is an industry that, it's hard. It's hard. So I start to wonder those things, and that's not a positive look on you. Um, I work with picture books every single day. Every single day. Trust me. I can visualize if you have done a good job of using your art notes and laying out your manuscript, I can picture it in my head. I do not need a dummy. I've got an imagination. But I don't want to be wondering those things about your character or the things beyond your writing. Keep the focus on you and your talent.
that makes sense and is sound advice. I think moving on, this came up in the Q&A as you were talking and is also something that was pre-submitted, which is, does your advice differ in any way for nonfiction picture books? I know there are a few folks who are talking about their nonfiction picture book projects.
Yes, sort of. Yes and no. The answer to everything is yes and no. Um, right now, what the market really, really, really wants more of um, is nonfiction that doesn't feel like nonfiction. Um, I have, because of my prior experience as an educator, a lot of my contacts um, really enjoy nonfiction picture books or, have overlap with the school and library markets. And um, one of the big things that they say constantly is most of the nonfiction that is out there, that is published, that is being read by kids, is boring. It is very textbooky. It is very straightforward. It is very, here are some facts, the end. And kids' reading levels are so low right now. They've been on a decline for a very long time, but COVID kind of blew that up. Reading levels are so low that the things that they used to pick up in that way, they're not picking up anymore. And so publishers, readers, parents, agents, nonfiction is still selling, but they're looking for the fun. They're looking for some type of narrative thread. They're looking for lots and lots of voice. They're looking for personality. They're looking for the things that will trick kids into learning. Because what used to work in nonfiction is not working right now.
Thank you. Yeah, that is interesting. Um, I guess I saw this come up also in the Q&A, and it is also something that was pre-submitted. It might be the same person, who knows. But it's about folks who are aspiring illustrators. So they may know how to write, they already have like great ideas for their picture book manuscript. They're an author, but they're also a skilled artist, but they're new to illustrating picture books specifically. What should they know about the process of illustrating their own work or becoming a professional picture book illustrator? Are there any resources you might recommend?
So two jump to mind immediately. The first one is actually one of my self-published illustrators. She doesn't do illustration, book illustration anymore. She teaches aspiring illustrators. She has a YouTube channel with tons of free things. Her her name is impossible to spell. I'm sorry. You can look up one of my books and copy it off of that. Her name is Genevieve VL Techereau. She was the illustrator of Rhythm Rescue, so you can go copy it from from Amazon. But she has a YouTube channel that really dives into the nitty gritty there. But mostly, you would want to be looking for information and insights on things like text placement, like how much space within the art to leave for the text. How much distance do you need at the edge of a page? What does book layout look like? And there's tons of information there floating around on the internet. But as far as querying goes, that's something I would say in the query. I would say, here's my artistic experience. I'm still, I'm not a professional picture book illustrator, but I am working on that piece. This ties into a question I see in the Q&A. As an agent, with very few exceptions, I can only send one manuscript at a time to an editor, not per author, per agent. Again, there's very few exceptions to that. But that means that if I have someone who writes super, super, super literary picture books, they're an author only, and they write about their cultural heritage, and I have someone query me, even though their cultural heritage is completely different, but their book would be the same fit for the same editors at the same imprints. Suddenly, I'm in a position where I have to pick who gets the opportunity and who doesn't. That's not good for the writer. It's also not good for me, but that's not good for the writer. However, if a writer says, I write super literary things about my culture, but I also write middle grade, or I aspire to write YA in the future, or I'm working on this thing. Here's where I see my career going. Suddenly, where I saw competition before, now it's a matter of, oh, so there's something I can do to pivot until these spots free up, and then we can put that on submission. Now we don't have that competition and that thing that's bad for the author. But not everybody writes multiple genres. I have some authors that only write picture books. That's it. I have some that write multiple genres and kind of genre hop. I have some that are author illustrators, so I'm able to pitch them as just an illustrator while they're working on their manuscript or whatever it is. It's kind of like a moving puzzle. And that is why if someone says, I cannot take on more of XYZ right now, that's what they're saying. They're saying, if I signed you, if I took you on, I don't have anywhere to send your work. That's not fair to you. Now, here's the even trickier part. In the past, editor response times used to be much faster, 2 to 3 months ish, give or take. That is not the response times anymore, not even close. I just had an editor finally get back to me on a board book. She had it for over a year, and it was a no. But every time I reached out, she was answering those emails, and it got further in the process and further in the process. So I wasn't being ghosted or anything like that. But I can't ask one of my writers to wait in line a year for me to send to that editor. Weeks, those will fly by, no problem. But a year, that's a lot to ask. And so that's what I want you to keep in mind as you are going through this experience. Write. Write a lot. Write from your heart. Get really good at it. And do not just try to put all your eggs in one basket. When it comes to getting an agent, you just need one yes. You just need one manuscript to get that foot in the door. And that might not be the first manuscript you've written. It might not even be the first manuscript you query. When I was in the query trenches back in March, what I did, I parted ways with my previous agent, and I literally sat down for several days, and I pulled out every picture book I had. And the first thing I did was I cringed, because I literally said to my husband, I'm like, I don't know why my old agent repped me. I wouldn't say yes to this. What the heck is this? Like, what was I thinking? This is horrible. It wasn't that bad, but I'm very self-critical. So I revised. And then I built a query package for every single manuscript that I had polished enough to go to query. And what I did then is I made my list of agents, and I said, great, what is their wish list like? Who do they represent? What is their style like? Ooh, okay, they want more literary stuff. This is the most literary one I have. That's what I'm sending. This person, okay, they're looking for much more fun and lighthearted and commercial. This is the most commercial thing I have. Go. And I sent that way. Those are things that you can do. The more you write, the more opportunities you'll open, the more you'll grow, the more you'll learn. It's a hard industry. I know it is. But the best thing you can do is keep going, find a really great support system, and utilize those resources in that community around you.
Yeah, that's amazing advice, and really great to like touch on. I think it's sort of like the opaque part of the process, but the sort of list management and client management and the submission process and all of that, I think, it can feel like insider baseball knowledge, but is really important for authors to know about, especially querying authors to know about. It's not necessarily because agents arbitrarily decide that this genre isn't working. It might just be for their list and the current balance of their list. They're not taking on certain types of projects. So we are at time, but if there was something from the Q&A that you really wanted to address, Vicky, I know there are a few about current market trends, maybe. Johnny, do we have time for one more?
Yeah, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so there was one that was submitted that I would really love to end on because I think it's important. For those of you that don't know, I'm Puerto Rican. So when I write about my own cultural heritage, that's where those stories center. So someone asked, are publishers shying away from books that address race or LGBTQ plus issues? Is there a strong market right now for books about empathy, anti-bullying, etc.? And is it hard to sell a book on a tough issue like parents' mental illness? And the short answer is, in my experience, no. I'm very fortunate that at CMA I have a super supportive boss, and one of the things that she asks on every single editor call that we have, she says, "How is the current political climate impacted, like what you're acquiring?" She's very point blank about it. And I have been pleasantly surprised with the responses that we've received. Basically, most editors have said that they're not looking for fewer of those voices. If anything, they're looking for more. Now, that doesn't mean that good stories don't have a good shot because good stories always sell. But no, from what I'm seeing, sensitive topics are not being shied away from. If it's a good book, it's a good book, and um, your agent is looking for a good fit. So write what you want to write, and then focus on finding the person that will see the same value that you do.
That's great to hear. Well, Vicky, tomorrow, this was wonderful. I had never heard the literary versus commercial sort of framing for children's books. That's extremely illuminating. All right. Well, thanks everyone, and we hope to see you again at another event. Tamara and LAOC, thank you so much for all these we put together. We probably won't do any until the spring at the soonest. So this has been great. Thanks for everything.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for having me.